Hey, Powercraft Mutated Redstone here. In this video, I'm going to talk about a topic that concerns everyone today. 2019 coronavirus disease, or COVID-19 for short. Obviously, everyone knows how to get protected from the disease. The current numbers about it, yada yada yada. It is definitely something that needs no further consideration. Or is it? See, this virus is not just any virus. It is a very contagious virus and can leave you permanently damaged no matter how young you are or how strong your immune system is. For this reason, I'm going to talk about the biological mechanisms behind the disease, key to understanding this very crucial trending topic. I'll also demonstrate how you can mathematically model this disease by taking key social factors into consideration. I will then show you, dear viewer, how you can create your own computer simulation in order to simulate the pandemic using simple Python programming. This video is so that no one, including you, the viewer, stays uninformed about this pandemic shaking the world today. Let's start. COVID-19 is caused by the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, and it originated in Wuhan, China. The virus primarily attacks your epithelial lung cells. Epithelial here refers to the cells making up the barrier surface between your lungs and outside of your lungs. The virus binds to your cells and injects their foreign RNA genetic instructions inside them to trick your cell into doing what they want to do instead of what your cells would normally do. These genetic instructions tell your cells to build more of the virus and finally undergo apoptosis, or cellular suicide, to release the produced viruses to the rest of the lung tissues. Your immune cells will notice these infected cells and come to fight them. However, they will receive foreign instructions that turn them into rogue killing machines that use excessive force that accidentally kill innocent cells, metaphorically speaking. In most people, these rogue immune cells eliminate the virus regardless and eventually evacuate the scene, leaving behind serious, irreversible lung damage. This is how most people survive. However, if you're in the group with a weaker immune system, say the elderly, more immune cells will be infected, will kill more innocent cells, and the virus will have damaged your lungs to the extent that respiration will have to be assisted by ventilators or that it will simply fail. In this situation, your lung becomes much more vulnerable to the bacteria coming from the air you breathe, and these bacteria will give your lungs their final death blow if you haven't suffocated yet. After this point, death is unavoidable. In order to understand the pandemic in a more mathematical sense, we must understand that for every person infected, there is an average number of new cases they themselves cause. If we say that a person spreads the virus to 2 other people E on an average day, and all of these people have a 90% probability P of catching the disease because they don't take protective measures, we can safely say that the amount of cases each day increases by a factor of 0.9 times 2, or 1.8. This growth factor can also give us the number of new cases if we can determine a constant C to be 1 minus E times P. E times P minus 1. And multiply the result by the number of total cases n. This constant C's product with n can be thought of as the derivative or instantaneous rate of change of the number of cases n in terms of days past t. This derivative, dou n over dou t, will be the growth factor of our pandemic. Since it's always equal to C times n, by our definition, an exponential growth may be expected. But this model is wrong. As more people get the disease, it becomes harder and harder to find new susceptible individuals to spread it to. So the probability of finding new cases decreases as the number of total cases N increases. Also, our constant C can't stay that way forever anyway, or else the number of people affected would eventually exceed the population due to constant exponential growth. This is taken into account in a model that's called a logistic curve. The probability of finding a person already infected and not being able to spread the virus is N over population P. So the probability of spreading the virus to them is 1 minus N over P. If you multiply our growth model with this taken into account as well, we get our logistic curve equation. Though N over though T equals C times parentheses 1 minus N over P times N. Multiplying both sides with though T over parentheses 1 minus over N over P all times N, we can use this to integrate our value. I'm going to skip the integration part as it's a little tricky, but you can see its solution by typing it into a website like www.integralcalculator.com. I highly recommend this free service by David Scherfgen. But anyway, the equation reduces to, after taking the integral of both sides, ln n minus ln parentheses n minus p equals c times t plus d, which, skipping a few steps, simplifies into n equals p over 1 minus e to the c minus d all. The graph of this equation, which you can draw or even curve it to the current trends, looks something like this. Okay guys, we will now get into the fun stuff. We will now create our COVID-19 simulation via Python. We first import random math, matplotlib.pyplot, and turtle libraries for our simulation, all of which are almost always found in your computer. However, if you can't import any of these, you can use the pip command in your shell. You good? Okay. We create our simulation window wn using the screen command of turtle. Then we define a term and _b, number of blocks per street in our simulation. This is actually just the square root of the number of families and f in our simulation, and _f in our simulation, since we will have each block contain a family of 4 people in a square grid. So mb and _b is essentially a value we use to create a perfect square for n _f. Then clearly n _f is the square of n _b. I will set this as low, as a low value so that the simulation will work quickly when we eventually run it. The day variable will tell our simulation how many iterations it has to do for a day-night cycle to be completed. Let's say each family has 4 people and each of these 4 people need 100 iterations to be simulated. This is so that the more people we have in our simulation, we will not have to go through a smaller proportion of these people. S_r will be the number of iterations it will take for a susceptible individual who's just become infected to either beat the disease or be killed by it. Since these individuals will either develop immunity or be dead, they're considered as a single group called removed. So our S_r variable is the iterations it should take for an individual to go from the susceptible group to the removed group, or for how many iterations it should be in the infected group. Note that once a person gets infected, they're not susceptible anymore, nor are they removed. They're in a completely different third category. Now, we can give a probability P of a susceptible person who contacts an infected person to also be infected. And we can assign 0.9 to it, just like we did in our mathematical model. We can then set the scale as C to be inversely correlated with the square root of number of families, so that more families we have, the scale will get smaller. We use the square root value and _b in here because the scale is a linear proportion, not an area one. We can also set a duration for the simulation, which we will make just 1 day for demonstration purposes. Now we must create a for loop from 0 to nf to create a home coordinate for each family. We can use these intricate formulas to create a unique position for each family with designated number I. Storing these coordinates in temporary variables, we can then create two variables that store x and y coordinates of the home of a family I. We do this by executing a code line that assigns the values to hx underscore I and hy underscore I, where I is anything from 0 to the number of families, designating which of n underscore f families a given family is. We can temporarily set these values to be directly hx underscore I and hy underscore I to be used later in the loop, as evaluating them in each time will be hard to write in code. Then we can create another for loop for each member of the family I. Since they have 4 people, the values go from 0 to 3 inclusive. So a range of 4 means 4 different values that start from 0 and don't include 4, 0, 1, 2, 3. So for every member j of every family, I must start off as a group with susceptible people. As we're examining the spread of the disease, we will call this value 0 and execute it to be assigned the value of SIR I underscore j. Then we can create turtle for this member called T underscore I underscore j, where again I and j hold the places of the family and family member identifiers respectively. Let's set this turtle to be called T underscore I underscore j temporarily, so that we will not evaluate it every time we want to do operations on it in this while for loop, just like we did with hx underscore I and hy underscore I. We must lift up the turtle by using the command up, as it will draw its path out otherwise. We can then set the turtle's speed value as 0, which will make it go as fast as possible and make our simulation faster. Remember, we're running this for one virtual day. We can then scale our turtle with the sc variable that we have defined. We may want to make it face a random direction so that all turtles don't go the same direction when the simulation starts. We'll use the setHeading command for that. Then we can put our turtles to their homes using the temporary hx underscore I and hy underscore I variables that we have defined priorly. This will be enough to initialize our model, but in order to have it simulate an epidemic, we must also define these turtles' behaviors, or pandemic. But first, let me infect a turtle. Because without someone with infected property initially, the disease will never spread in a given community. So let's choose a random family identifier using the same range we used to assign them in the random module, and store it as f underscore temp. Then let's do the same for the identifier of the family member with a random range of 4. Now let's make its SIR underscore I underscore j value 1 by executing an assignment expression with these random values taking places of I and j. Let's define values for value for infected people as 1. We may want to mark these people with the color red by evaluating T underscore I underscore j with our random values and running the turtle color function on it, assigning it the color red. To draw our analysis graph after the simulation, we need to create lists that can hold data. Let list x be the independent variable, the ordinal value of all of our iterations. This means that its elements will start from 0 and go to the value of the variable sim underscore dur. We also need to store the number of susceptible people for each of these iterations in the list s. The number of infected people in I underscore, not just I, so that it's not mixed with the iteration variable, and the number of removed people in the list r. Now we need to create the main window loop. This is the most fun part of the video. This loop will run for the sim_dur iterations that we have defined before. Let's pick a random family f and a random family a family member f_m using the rand_range feature of the random module. We can then evaluate the family's coordinates as hx and hy for later use. We can also assign our turtle's pointer or reference to a temporary variable t, so that we will not have to evaluate it every time we reference it using f and f_m. Let go be the random forward movement of a turtle scaled by the factor f. We can do this using the random command from the random module, which picks a random float value between 0 and 1, and multiplying it by a number and our scale. I picked the former as 100, and I recommend you to do so as well. We scale it down or up because the distances aren't automatically scaled when we scale the turtles. It will also be useful to store the turtle's SIR value so that we can know whether it can infect or be infected by other people in a given iteration of the loop. We must also rotate the turtles randomly so that they will not always go to same directions. So a random change, addition or subtraction to our turtle's heading direction and its value in modulus 360 will ensure that we will have our turtles change their directions in the correct format. Now we will create the if statement for the day and the night in our simulation. I'm going to do this part as if there is no security regulation enforced by the government for the occasion. So people will go out to the city at day and back to their houses at night. You can change this as you wish, creating special hospital locations and assigning some turtles as doctors. But so we will divide our iteration by the half of this day and take its value in modulo 2. This effectively returns 0 in the first half of the day and 1 in the second half. Let 0 be the day and 1 be the night. For day, we will take the weighted average of the city center, which I chose to be the origin, and our randomly generated angle, or more specifically, the angle the turtle makes with the city center, and our randomly generated angle. The weight of the angle towards the city center, given by the towards function, depends on how far you are to it, which is given by the distance function on the turtle t. What I'm about to do is mathematically how you can take the weighted arithmetic mean of these angles. I use this procedure so that the turtles will not just randomly go away from the city, as there would be no boundaries in a realistic scenario. Sorry, there would be boundaries in a realistic scenario. For the same reason, we may want to contribute to our randomly generated distance so that the turtles will come back quicker the further away they are from the city. And by our randomly generated distance, I mean the go variable that we had randomly defined before. We also want the day to look bright, so we will keep the background color white with the method bg color on our main window object. We'll do the exact same thing with the night condition, but with different weights, one of which is determined by a different distance, not to the origin but to the turtle's home. Because at night we want them to go to their homes and spread it to their family, as it would be the case in a realistic scenario. With the previous logic, night should look dark, so we will make the window background color gray. If it were black, the susceptible turtles wouldn't be distinguishable because they're already black by default. Remember the s_r variable that we defined beforehand? It was the number of iterations spent in the infected group. We will divide this variable by the total number of turtles, and this will give us the expected number of iterations that the loop must go through for one turtle in order to have it become removed. Because on average, n_f times 4 iterations will get between each iteration of a given turtle, and this means that giving it much more of a probability would compensate for that gap. So if that random probability is satisfied, i.e. the selection from the random range is equal to 0 and the turtle is already infected, i.e. its SIR value is set to 1, let's execute the assignment operation that reassigns the turtle's value to 2 and makes its color purple with the corresponding turtle command for us to be able to distinguish it. Basically, it makes it removed. Let's append our data lists some default values. The independent x variable will clearly contain our iteration. For s, I underscore and r lists, however, we can append 0 to them and then add to this 0 as we find turtles from the s, I underscore and r groups in a for loop, or just you can say also directly I. Again, we create a double loop for each family and their members. Let's make t underscore j underscore k refer to our turtle and SIR underscore j underscore k to its state using eval. Using an if statement, we can now update our lists newly appended values for SIR underscore j underscore k 0, 1 or 2 values for s, I underscore and r respectively. Now we're going to create a list of conditions that check if the main loop's turtle t is infected and can infect this nested loop's turtle t underscore j underscore k or vice versa. For this purpose, let's store the main loop's turtle and this nested loop's turtle, the SIR values, in a set called SIR underscore vals. Let the boolean, meaning true or false, variable not self mean the condition that t and t underscore j underscore k are not the same turtles in question, which can be done by comparing their family and family membership identifiers. Secondly, we can also check if this contact between the two turtles is dirty, metaphorically speaking. It's the probability that we defined before that basically assumed that the contact is mostly very dirty and irresponsible per se. We said that p equaled 0.9. So it's the probability that a randomly selected float value between 0 and 1 will be less than our probability, which is equal to our probability, of course. We'll directly use a less than sign because the upper boundary of random does not include 1 itself. So it's ever so slightly more likely to get a lower value. The next condition will be the two turtles' distances being too close, stored in the variable too close. I set the limit as 20 units times the scaling factor, but you can play around with it. The last condition is whether one of the turtles is infected and the other is susceptible. Since sets don't care about ordering, we can directly tell Python to check that our SIR underscore val set is equal to the sets 0, 1. I call this susanInf. Now let's take all of these boolean values and put them into a tuple called conditions. We can then create an if statement that verifies none of these conditions are false by putting the condition that there is no false value in this list that we have just created, or in the tuple, more precisely. If all of these conditions are in fact met, we will execute an assignment that makes sure that both turtles' SIR values are now in the infected zone and that both look red, which is the visual cue that they are infected in our simulation. The reason we didn't directly change the loop variables SIR and SIR underscore j underscore k and execute the new string that calls the actual variables is that they store their values in a different location than the original variables. Then we can use the setHeading command from the turtle module to rotate our turtle t in our desired orientation that we defined as rotback, and use the command forward from the same module on T to make it go forward by the amount that we defined as go back. Finally, let's close our turtle window with the by command and create our matplotlib graph. In order to do this, we will create figure fig and add the subplot x1 to it with the configuration 111. Then we'll plot the number of susceptible people using the plot command on x1 between independent x and dependent s, with the color specified as black, coded as k, and labeled susceptible. Then we'll do another plot between x and I underscore, with color red and label infected. Finally, let's plot the correlation between x and r, coloring it magenta, since it's the closest to our original color purple that's used to designate it, and labeling it removed. And after we're done with all of this, let's show this graph and finish our code. It's time to run it now. So guys, thanks for watching this video. It took a lot of effort and it couldn't be possible if it weren't for your support. So please, like the video and subscribe. Obviously, if you liked the video. If you didn't like the video, you can just dislike. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!